bij even.
Ja.
Hey.
Boah, du fast.
Was ist denn jetzt hier los?
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings and welcome to the Anadromist. This is Burn Power coming to you on a pleasant, warm summer day here in Tbilisi, Georgia, where the greenery has passed the tipping point of the season. And you know that point, somewhere in July, August, depending on where you live, in the Northern Hemisphere, of course, where things seem to no longer be growing, but to start shrinking. It's a subtle moment. I always look for it when I have the time in the summer. Well, today what we're going to be doing is, this is kind of going to end up as an addendum to my coming tourism and reality series. And what I want to do is I want to give you what shall we call it? A ranking of different kinds of tourists, different types of tourists. Now, I understand. This might seem a little bit, snobbish of me, pretentious to be able to rank different kinds of tourists. But I find if one, for instance, looks at the extremes, and the extremes would be something like, stag party tourism down near the bottom, and research tourism, where you stay in a place for quite a while researching a subject. Those are very different from each other, with everything in between. There will be 25 rankings. And one thing I do want to say, so you don't misunderstand me, is that even if some form of tourism that you've taken ranks near the bottom, with the exception of something like sex tourism or stag party tourism, even some of the lower forms of tourism, say cruise ship tourism, doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you had a terrible time. But what it does mean is you can improve. You can go to the next step, or two, or three. And I've seen people when I lived in Alaska who came off cruise ships. Who knows what they saw? Things that, simple skim across the pond, but they saw enough to come back and live in Alaska. So that's graduating from a low level of tourism to the ultimate, living someplace, which is not tourism anymore, but it is a wonderful thing to have accomplished. So we'll say that. And again, just because something's near the bottom doesn't mean you're a bad person, or that you might not have a great experience. But it does say there's room for growth. So what are my criteria? My criteria are this. First of all, what is the point of the tourism? Is the point of the tourism something which, just something you want to get from the culture, something simple that you're trying to take with no sense of learning, no sense of giving in the best sense? Or are you traveling in order to learn something? Now, actually, this is an age-old debate. And I just read a book by Lucy Lethbridge called Tourists, and she looks at popular travel, not snobby travel, but popular travel, in the 19th and early 20th centuries. And it is a fascinating book because this dichotomy has always been there. And it is the train in particular that starts people moving towards the idea of popular tourism. The only downside to it, which she, writing the book, was very well aware of, is that, well, what happens when people who know nothing about where they're traveling to show up in hordes at a destination and end up somehow diminishing it? And what constitutes that diminishment? Is it a diminishment of the more snobby tourist who comes along and says, oh my gosh, we can't go visit the Mona Lisa anymore because it's overrun by them, which it is. Or is it, how does one tackle it? It's a huge subject. That's why I'm doing a whole series on it eventually. But just to give you something to start chewing on, I thought I would make this ranking of different types of tourism and travel. Okay, so on to the list. Since there are 25 different categories of tourism that I've made, and this is, it's not arbitrary. This is based on my observations, and this is just when I made the list, I said, oh, okay, I've got 25, and I'm not going to spend a long time on each one. To see more, come back when I finally make the whole Tourism and Reality series. Again, this is going to end up as an addendum. Since there were 25, I broke it down into 5 different categories of 5 each. And this just made sense from an organizational standpoint. But the way the major categories go is tourism that causes active harm, tourism that causes ignorant harm, problem tourists, good travelers, and finally, respectful travelers. And so we're going to be moving up the list. I'm going to start at the bottom with number 25, sex tourism. What could be further away from good tourism than sex tourism? Amsterdam, Bangkok, Manila. In fact, I remember reading a Let's Go Europe guide. I haven't seen those around for a long time. I have the feeling they died. But they were talking about going to Europe, and this was after the Wall and the Velvet Revolution and all of this. So they were talking about going to the Czech Republic, and the way they talked about, and you should, try to meet the girls, and then the guy goes, dude, you might get laid. Which, to me, is the most predatory thing I've ever heard. And I read that back in, 91, 92. And I was going there in 93, and I just thought to myself, this is what's being encouraged. To go somewhere just to pick up chicks. But it gets much darker than that. Places like, that's Amsterdam. But Bangkok, Manila, let's put it to you this way. The trade in human bodies is considerably more degrading and, unfortunately, a lot younger. So, enough said on that. That should be clear. Next on our, moving up the notch just an iota is stag party tourism. Now, the Brits have made a specialty of doing this in the city of Prague. And I remember, I've been going to Prague since the year 2000. And I remember sometime, I think it was 2005, I started seeing these kind of people, always Brits, rambling around the city, going, and they were drunk out of their eye, pissed to hell. And they were basically going to sex emporiums of different sorts. They were getting drunk and puking on the streets. I had one friend who worked for a while in one of these kinds of establishments, and she said she just hated hearing the sound of British voices come into this place where they did dancing, exotic dancing, shall we call it. But what made this possible was the arrival on the scene, particularly of Ryanair. And there were other cheap air flight service. But Ryanair somehow figured out that there was a need. You see, you could travel, particularly in the beginning, for like 20 pounds. 20 British pounds. Round trip to Prague. And this was enough to open the floodgates of these kind of yobs who never traveled, the kind of soccer thugs and hooligans who you never would see out of the country until the prices came down. By the way, as an American, I would like to say, for those of you who are European or Asian, there's a whole class of American you've never seen because they don't travel, because they don't have passports. And let me just put it to you this way, you can be happy about that. Well, down near there is sports tourism. Now, sports tourism could be something quite interesting, like going to the Olympics or going to, you have a specialty sport like archery or something. I haven't got a problem with that. But what I'm talking about here is football tourism, and I mean the world variety, not the American variety, although the American variety can get rather savage as well and extremely tribal. But often, you get huge fights and conflicts because of these travels. So what you're seeing here are travelers who go to use a place. They're not going to get anything from it. For instance, someone figured out that when the Czech Republic opened, there were a lot of beautiful but poor women, so they used the place for its openness and looseness. Amsterdam itself is to blame for that. So the stag parties, the sex tourism, but the sports tourism is, I remember in 2005, I was in Warsaw, and there were these soccer hooligans. I ran into them several times, once on a train in Austria, and they were just pouring beer out of the trains as the train would start to take off from the station on people on the platform. Yeah, sports tourism, that kind of sports tourism. The kind where I'm going to root for my team obnoxiously. Sports tourism is way down on the list. But, this seems like a kind of a lower class sort of thing. But the next one is just the opposite. Luxury tourism. By luxury tourism, I mean these exclusive, really private tours, private places, private beaches, private islands. I remember in New York City, I used to go as an art mover. I would go to different places, got all over the city. Fascinating job. Maybe someday I'll talk about my experiences delivering and picking up art in New York City for 3 years. But we went into the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, which has a reputation of being one of the oldest and most glamorous hotels in the city. And there was a weird thing that we saw, and it was a magazine there. I don't remember the magazine. It wasn't called the Waldorf magazine or something, but I picked it up and took a copy home because it was free for the people staying there. And I went and looked at it, and it was basically what can I say? It was like the New Yorker, but ritzy, with lots more luxury ads. And I'm not talking luxury ads like, Zara or H&M. I'm talking real luxury ads. So we're talking Tiffany jewels and we're talking gold, and we're not talking your neighborhood, jeweler selling a diamond ring, and luxury apartments for sale and such. But evidently they were catering to exactly this classification of people, luxury tourists. And they, again, they're not interacting with the environment. They're creating a separate environment. They're using the environment to create their own fantasy on. They are marginally better than the stag parties. Sometimes they are the sex tourism. We won't get any farther into that. But the truth is, the luxury tourist is a tourist who essentially, now we're not talking about simply a person who has money traveling. That could be a very great tourist, someone who really has their eyes open. But we're talking about the people who travel the world in these weird isolated bubbles of private jets and private yachts and private boats. This is a damaging tourist because they're essentially, it's like they have a big straw and they're sucking things up. They give nothing. Of course, they'll say, well, we're giving back to the community by Well, what? I don't know. Someone will tell me something, I'm sure. And then, finally, another, I think, causing active harm is something almost new, something that we all can take part of. It's selfie tourism. It's Instagram tourism.
Fucking run into this thing. Jesus Christ! That is huge! That is absolutely huge! Yes! Yes! Ah! Fuck! Ah! Ah!
Traveling the world to take pictures of yourself in various places. And you would say to yourself, well, what's the problem with that? If I get to the Eiffel Tower, I want a picture of myself with the Eiffel Tower in the background. Or if I get to the Mona Lisa, I want a picture of myself with the Mona Lisa in the background, which everyone else in the same room has the same frickin' idea, and no one can see the Mona Lisa anymore because of that. It is an interesting experience just to watch the insanity of the tourists there. But there are whole sites that have been shut down because people have gone to certain places to take selfies of themselves and caused harm to the environment, caused harms to themselves, caused harm to, there's I can't remember the name of the mountain in New Hampshire that was shut down. It's at the end of the Appalachian Trail, the top part, the whole park there was shut down, which the people on the Appalachian Park are like, oh no, I mean, not the Appalachian hiking trail, are like, oh no, we came all this way and now we can't go. It's because they're all coming there to take selfies of themselves on top of the mountain to say we made it, damaging the entire ecosystem in order to prove a point.
Nature can be a dangerous environment where risks need to be properly mitigated, but the rise of the outdoors as a lifestyle trait or social media backdrop has perhaps masked this truth. Baxter State Park, for example, justifies much of its heavy-handedness with its need to keep visitors safe. Katahdin is a well-known yet high-risk mountain in a region of America with relatively tamer nature. A hiker from Boston, for example, is likely not accustomed to the level of isolation or exposure that Katahdin presents because there just aren't that many mountains with the same risk factor in the region. The reservations-only system means no one can make the spontaneous decision to hike Baxter without planning. They'll spend days or weeks researching before even getting to parking reservations. Upon arrival, Baxter Rangers are trained to essentially triage hikers at Katahdin trailheads, checking whether they have adequate footwear, clothing, supplies, and asking questions that, according to the park's director, are designed to subtly spook them. Get them in the mindset that what they're about to do has risk and isn't just a walk in the park. Then, as a final filter, this foreboding sign is placed a half-mile up the trail to be read once the initial excitement of the day is worn off and a more rational brain perhaps takes over. Despite these precautions, roughly 1 in every 2,000 Baxter visitors requires medical or search and rescue resources, far above the nationwide average, and more than 60 people have died while climbing Maine's tallest peak.
We will eventually talk about this whole phenomenon, but I can think of few things that people commonly do. I mean, everything I've mentioned up till now is something for a specific kind of, shall we call them, clientele. But selfie tourism happens everywhere, and it is literally, and I mean it in the original sense of the word, not figuratively, literally, what in the world have we done to our language, but literally is destroying places and causing active harm. Okay, the next category is ignorant harm. And this is people who don't really think about it. They're not doing anything really obvious to themselves or anyone else. That is to say, if you look at this happening once or twice, you say to yourself, oh, okay, I could see this. But when you add the numbers and when you add the kinds of behaviors that go with these forms of tourism, it really is causing harm, but the people doing it are ignorant, and it's very easy to become one of these if you don't put a lot of thought into your traveling. So, cruise ships. So, just to let you know, when I lived in Alaska, I did indeed deal with cruise ship tourists. I would say 95% of the tourists we took on raft trips, on jet boat trips up the river to see eagles and animals, on trips to see bears close up and personal, which we could depend on the second half of the season. Most of these were indeed cruise ship passengers, most of whom had no idea about where they were. And there was this problem with finding the reality of the situation. And one of my jobs, particularly when I was taking people to see bears and I was doing all the spieling and driving and guiding myself, was I had to immediately, I'm a fairly tall guy. I'm not super tall, but I'm certainly tall enough. Taller as it turns out than most of the Hollywood movie stars that are out there. I would say I'm taller than 4/5 of them, because most of them are under 6 feet tall. They're just not that tall. It's really funny when you look into it. But because I'm tall, I would say, hey, you see how tall I am? And they go like, yeah. I go like, well, I've seen a bear that tall. And they were like, oh, okay, wow. I said, sitting down. And then they would all get this terrified look in their eyes, which is what I wanted, because they're coming off a cruise ship. For them, the reality of my life in Haines is a movie. They don't see it. They walk off straight off the dock. They're still looking at their smartphones. They have no idea where they are, surrounded by mountains and glaciers and rivers and the ocean water on the fjord. And people would ask, what's the elevation here? Yeah, we won't go any further into that. But, and they would walk into traffic. Literally, they just thought, this is our entertainment. So the traffic has to stop for us. And this is not, believe me, this happens everywhere where there is any form of mass tourism, any place where the tourism industry has taken hold. So, but I would take them out there and I would say, rule number 1 on how to deal with this experience today if we see bears. Listen to me. You know nothing. Listen to me. I'll explain much more of this. I did a recent video of anecdotes about animals in Alaska, which I recommend. And some of you may think, oh, Burns, he's just reflecting on his tour experiences. Au contraire. This is about reality. Because my feeling is that if you, the city dweller, think you understand reality without understanding animals, you are gravely mistaken. And I don't care how many interesting conversations you take part in the internet. If you don't understand an animal when you see it in the wild, you don't understand reality. Period. So let's continue with this, talking about cruise ships. And we used to get big ones. You're in and out in less than a day. You're mostly giving your money to the people who run concessions. The people who live in the town get very little because, in Haines, Alaska, which was not a huge cruise ship port, I would say we got sometimes two big 3,000 people cruise ships a week in the summer. Skagway, which is 13 miles away from Haines by water and 365 miles away from Haines if you drive there, would get 4 or sometimes more smaller cruise ships a day. 4 gargantuan cruise ships and 4 sometimes smaller cruise ships and more. And there was literally, I think, they said there was something like, 1,200 people who lived in the town. Not in the winter. I mean, from my reliable sources, there were only 600 people who lived there in the winter. Many of the people who owned the businesses were owned by people who lived in places like the dreaded California. Some of these businesses were owned by conglomerates. Here's the real evil part. You get all the way to Skagway, Alaska, which is 1,000 miles up the coast. Excuse me, I just have to talk in miles all the time. You can do your own homework on this because I just haven't got the time and I'm too full of passion on the subject. They go all the way up to 1,000 miles north of Seattle on what's called the Inside Passage amongst all these islands. Get up there, and what do they find when they get to the streets of Skagway? Diamond stores, jewelry shops. It's the same in Juneau. It's the same in most places. Fortunately, Haines, we were much more of a living place and not just a tourist imitation of itself. But here's the nasty part. Many of those diamond shops, in fact, all of the diamond shops, what does diamonds have to do with Alaska? Nothing. Are run by the same cruise ships you're on. And all the way up, you're being told that, when you get to Skagway or Juneau, there'll be a special deal at these stores just for us. Okay. But I will eventually talk about my experience working with cruise ships in much more detail when I get to a whole episode in the Tourism and Reality series about what the world of cruise ships is like. Because I did spend, I don't know how many years, 11 years, maybe 12, 12 years, I think, working with people off these ships, some of whom had wonderful experiences. And in fact, I found often the people who enjoyed the trip the most were not the people who booked the trip and came, but their younger grandchildren who were in their teens or early 20s, who just kind of came along for the ride because they looked and said they weren't expecting Alaska, and that's what was there. We'll get there. The leisure industry tourist. This is also way down there. All-inclusive resorts, tours, where basically someone is taking you around. Party travel. I should have mentioned party travel here. I realize now that party travel is a whole zone in itself, but we'll throw them in here with leisure tourism because the whole point of party travel is to go somewhere and go to EDM, electronic dance music concert somewhere, which is just, that's very parasitic. That kind of thing of going somewhere just to have a party. It's better than the stag party tourism, but not by much. It again adds nothing. It has nothing to do with the culture and everything to do with, I want to go somewhere and have fun. And there's the operative word here. And fun is a word which often goes unchallenged. People just say, the point of life is to have fun. Is it? Really? Do you think that's the point of life? I really don't want to be around you then because you don't understand life at all. And I'll bet you get really depressed because a lot of life isn't fun. The leisure industry invites a certain kind of tourist. The all-inclusive resort keeps you away from, for instance, if you go to an all-inclusive resort in Jamaica, they try very hard to keep you away from Jamaica. I just saw a very chilling movie made by Brandon Cronenberg, David Cronenberg's son. If you know who David Cronenberg is as a filmmaker, you should be quaking in your boots to realize his son is even more intensely strange than his movies. And many of the same themes. But called Infinity Pool. And it's all about this weird connection from the people inside the all-inclusive resort who are basically prohibited with armed guards from going out into the fictional country. And of course, not only does it get really weird and intense, it goes beyond that. It is a scary movie. But then again, the leisure industry is kind of scary. Another recent film about this was The Menu, which came out last year with Ralph Fiennes and Anya Taylor-Joy. Highly recommend that movie. And because it's all about people going to an exclusive, this is kind of goes with the luxury tourism as well, exclusive chef's resort where he makes exclusive meals for people. The leisure industry is not about taking you to see places. They are about selling you the illusion of travel. So in New York City in February, people would be, drooling over tourism industry porn of yourself alone on a white sand beach with, turquoise water, and the idea that you would just be sipping on a drink with a little parasol on it, and this illusion, and when you get there, it's all contained, and there's too many people there to have, because they have to make money, so they're not going to have you all by yourself wandering around on beaches. So it's a complete illusion, and it doesn't connect you to the place you are visiting whatsoever. This is similar with a lot of package tours, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Business travel is the next category. Business travel. I don't know much about it, and I'll tell you why. It's because they're on a completely different track. They're not about traveling to go see places. They're about traveling because they have deals to make. They have to go meet clients. They have to go to conferences. They have to go to inspect facilities. So their whole connection, it's not about actual travel. Yet, these are the people who probably use up more gas mileage in airplanes than everybody else combined. These are the people who, with their expense accounts, basically pay for the flights you're on because they are often charged inflated rates, especially if they're going to be in first class. I'm not going to say too much more about business travel because, like I say, it is something kept away from those of us not a part of it. But it is certainly not good travel. It is, in a sense, the business traveler only thinks of the business they have to do. And unlike some of the traveling we will see later down the line here, the business traveler is going to make money, which is a whole different sort of kettle of fish than someone going to, say, understand Renaissance art in Florence. Then we come to the recreational traveler, but really the recreational tourist. I remember once when I first arrived in Alaska, it was in the first year I was there, and I remember the person and the conversation very directly. And I was looking out over this incredible Alaskan landscape, and I was standing near someone, and I said, yeah, it's hard to believe there are people who cannot appreciate this landscape without using it as a recreational opportunity. And she looked at me as if I had just taken the name of the Lord in vain. Because it had never occurred to her that there was any other way to approach the land. And I know, in Haines, Alaska, great place for recreational tourism. Once a year, we would get heli-skiers coming there. And what a heli-skier is someone with an awful lot of money who is usually taking part in these very limited competitions to go straight down a 3,000 meters straight drop from a mountain, or to put it, 4,500 kilometer straight drop. Meters. Straight drop. I got to stop trying to do this. Usually I'm very nice to everyone and try to do the meters and the feet, but nah. Anyway, down these sheer Alaskan cliffs, which were practically thrust out of the Pacific Ocean last year. And Here's the thing. Costs tons of money, uses up tons of resources for very few people, helicopter rides to the top. Middle of winter, it's nice, it brings a little economy into the city, but here's the problem. In the first 5 or 6 years we were there, I think we had 4 deaths from avalanches, because this usually happens in the mid-spring, and if it warms up a bit, those mountains get loose. Now, I have watched some of the footage, and in fact, there was a live event I remember watching. It is fascinating to watch these people, but the entire time I'm watching them ski straight down these incredible slopes, I'm saying to myself, what is the point of this? Have we become so bored with reality, the answer being yes, spoiler alert, that we have to ski down, as Douglas Adams said in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that we have to ski down works of art. We're a far cry now from the people in the Romantic era who went to the mountains and said, this is sublime, which then brought other people to the mountains who said, wow, mountains, who now we have gotten to the point where we're going like, let's go to the most dangerous slopes we can possibly find and ski down them. But that's not the only thing. The entire field of extreme outdoor activities is just a minefield of strange, realities. Why are we doing this? Why would a person go to Papua New Guinea just to raft down a river no one else has rafted down in a rubber raft? But it's not just that. Some people go places just to water ski or to play golf. Now, hiking, I would say, is in a different zone, and we'll mention it a bit later. Because hiking, you are just kind of passively taking things in and getting something from it. But these other things, people are going there primarily to, again, use the place. Now, you could say, yeah, but there's a lot of financial transactions. The unfortunate thing with a lot of financial transactions going along with tourism is they're not actually going back to the people who need them, that is, the people in the locality. Many of them are most of the money is going to people who sit in very high towers in very large cities and who collect the money from this industry. Guided tours, package tours. There's a great movie, not great, okay, sorry, my language slipped. There's a kind of funny movie, but let's do it that way. It came out in the late 60s called If This Is Tuesday, It Must Be Belgium, which is like a lampoon on the bus tour going through different countries. You can see something similar in the different vacation movies made by National Lampoon, particularly European Vacation. And it's the idea, in this movie, it's the idea that Americans have no idea where they're going. And they're just kind of along for the ride. And that is true. Now, Rick Steves, for instance, has a higher class of tourists who's going out. For instance, instead of filling a bus with 50 people, he'll fill it with 25, so everyone gets more leg room. He'll give the people more more connection to the place by telling them more historical facts, preparing them for where they're going. He does a good job at it.
On our tours, the smoothest and most efficient way to get from one destination to the next is generally by bus.
I actually was more anxious about the bus part than any other part of this tour. I thought, I don't want to be on a bus the whole time. And it was nothing like that. I was very hesitant about the bus. When I saw the amount of bus time on this tour, I was like, that's not going to be good. But, first stepped on that leather-seated, well-lit coach, I was thinking this is going to be okay.
We get off the bus, and I'm thinking, was that really 4 hours? Because it felt like an hour and a half.
I hate to say this, but you almost look forward to the bus rides because it is so relaxing.
The buses, especially in this part of the world, are fabulous because you know that you travel 20, 30, 40 miles and the landscape changes.
The problem is, it's like playing in a rock band. You're not the musician to these people. You're just passing through. And again, you're not really spending time with these people. You're not spending time in a place. You're just getting as a friend of mine used to call it, the Las Vegas of nature, the Las Vegas of tourism. You're getting the big highlights. You're stopping in this city. You're spending a day there. Your bus driver will park the vehicle for you and then take you to the next place the next day. Sometimes, good grief, you might be able to spend 2 days there. But this creates all sorts of problems, as well as, and connected to this is a lot of tourism related to travel videos, travel logs, I hate to call them documentaries. There's a whole species. Rick Steves does it. There are people I follow on YouTube who do good jobs at it. I watch them just because I'm interested in places, and it's a good way to get ideas. For far too many people who will all hear Rick Steves mention something like Hallstatt, Austria, and suddenly this little town is suddenly overrun with people in the dead of summer, because it really is dead. So there's a whole style of tourism here that's basically skimming through everything. You don't stop at all. And again, my criteria, and why that's a problem is, there are whole sections of the Cinque Terre along the coast of Italy, which essentially have had to put limits because too many people have pointed out how wonderful it is to go there. Too many guided tours want to come through there. It's a crazy situation. I was kind of glad that the world got a chance to breathe in 2020 from tourism, that there wasn't a lot of it. And now, of course, many people say, yeah, but what about our money? I admit it's a problem, but tourism is kind of a devil's bargain anyway.
He's going to go up and touch him on the head, pat him on the head as he goes by. Okay. He's gesturing.
Problem tourists is our next set of 5. A problem as in these people aren't necessarily causing harm, but they tend to clog things up. They tend to make the experience less enjoyable for each other and for everyone else, because this is us. So, holiday tourism. Yeah, who doesn't do holiday tourism? Where you're all in a mad rush, and it's always called the mad rush. In Christmas in America, everyone flies across the country to go home for a week or two, or an extended weekend, which makes the air travel just horrifying. It's the same in some places with New Year's. In France, it's August. Everybody takes August off. So they're all in Paris, they're all in the bigger cities, they all go down to the Côte d'Azur, the Azure Coast, which they then proceed to clog all their beaches. I mean, if you look at pictures of French beaches in August, down in the Mediterranean, it's just, why would I want to go there? I mean, it's even worse in places, I mean, there are places in China and such where I won't go to a beach anymore. If someone says, we're going to the beach, I'm kind of like, yeah, well, enjoy it. Because I won't, it will be terrifying to me to go to a beach. I haven't been to a beach in so long. I've been to beaches, but not to the beach, not to hang out, not to get slathered with sunblock, not to, be one of thousands of tourists laying on a beach. Which brings us to summer tourism. Why is summer tourism bad, Bern? Because summer tourism, quite frankly, as the weather has gotten warmer, summer tourism is not the time to go traveling. It should be the time you avoid traveling, but there is, of course, a reason why people travel in the summer. It's because in many places, the children are off in the summer from school, and so Families who have no choice, and quite frankly really don't understand how to travel, will go travel in the summer. And of course, people who work anywhere around the school system will be forced to do the same.
Look, traveling to Europe in summer is a nightmare. Don't come. I don't mean that in a xenophobic sense. Obviously, I'm an immigrant here. I love this continent. I love my life here. I love France. I love Paris. I am years into living here. But this continent can provide very different experiences, let's say, depending on where you're coming from, how long you choose to spend here, and what you're doing. Let me ask you this. Why do some people come here and have an amazing experience, and other people come here and end up hating it? You know, I've explored this before, but people seem to have a love-hate relationship with cities or places like Paris. And you think to yourself, is it the same city we're all talking about? Here's the thing. Travel can be so many different things. I've been on many trips in my life. Some have been deeply meaningful, mesmerizing, memorable. And then some trips have not been that. I would describe those other trips as more like superficial and forgettable. And I'm starting to notice patterns in what creates the first kind of trip, the kind of trip that we all want to have, the positive kind, versus the second kind of trip, the negative kind. And I am making this to help you avoid those negative trips. This is why I say don't come to Europe in summer unless you really know what you're getting yourself into. And do not let the long, warm days of summer fool you. This is a very complicated time of year to travel here. So here is the secret. Here's the reason why travel in Europe sucks in summer. It's because people utterly lack creativity. Honestly, and this is going to sound a little bit condescending, but I've made this mistake as well, okay? I've also been a fool. Most people are sheep when they travel. It's that effect, right? Where if you see a bunch of people looking at something, you want to look at it as well. You're like, what's so interesting about that? They take photos of things that get photographed like 4 billion times a day. So instead of spending a fortune, you can get the exact same photo just by Googling it. You know, it's that same law, that same facet of human psychology, which says a restaurant that is full and busy is better quality than an empty restaurant. Sometimes that's totally true, and sometimes it isn't. And that is how you end up with the problems that make travel in summer here terrible. Hordes of people, long lines for all tourist attractions or anything to do like museums or bookstores. Everyone is in the exact same places, try to do the exact same things. And because of the laws of supply and demand, because there's so much demand, you're getting seasonal pricing, which is why you end up paying a fortune for a crappy spot.
And summer tourism to me, I worked in Alaska. I thought to myself, I'm glad I'm here because we don't have a lot of tourists. We have a healthy amount, but it's not Skagway. It's not Disney World. It's not Florida in the middle of the summer. Florida in the middle of the summer is like going south of hell. I can't imagine why people would do such a thing, but we have to take our summer vacation. Summer tourism makes a really, really good ancillary argument as to why people should not go to public schools. I mean, there are other better reasons, but you know, the idea that you have to follow this weird schedule and to everyone get out at the same time, go to the same places. Everything gets crowded in the summer, and it's gotten worse over time. Seeing as I just turned 68 years old, I can say, without a doubt, summer tourism now positively, absolutely sucks compared to summer tourism when I was younger. And it's just gotten worse over time with more crowds, more people, people finding new ways to go explore. And one of those ways might be just to be a solo tourist. Now, I'm going to mention solo tourist here and independent traveler later, so don't confuse these two. A solo tourist is essentially the same as a package tourist. They're going to the same boring places. They're boring because everyone goes there. The one advantage that the solo tourist has over most of the other different kinds of tourists we've talked about is that they can go off season, which is a much better time to go. But the solo tourist is going to go to a city, tick off the Eiffel Tower, tick off the Louvre, tick off the Gare d'Orsay Museum, the Musée d'Orsay, tick off, everything you're supposed to do. and then go to the next place, go to Berlin and tick off the Reichstag and tick off, all the different places there. Go to, they're going to be in all these places. Heaven help you if you go to Rome. It's just the solo tourist doesn't have imagination. They're reading guidebooks, and I have no particular problem with guidebooks. They've helped me more than time. And in fact, I appreciate guidebooks more than I do most of what you see on the internet. In many cases, there are exceptions to the rule. But nevertheless, the solo tourist is often a tourist who's independent but without the imagination. They're doing the same things. They're just doing it by themselves. And then we come to a more recent phenomena, which I have learned to have less respect for over time, and that is the digital nomad. The digital nomad, basically you take your work with you and you travel around the world. You can afford to live in Thailand, so you travel there. There are a few of them here in Tbilisi, Georgia. Fortunately, not that many, but enough. They're in countries where they can afford to stay because they have the money that the rest of the people in the country don't have. So some people have said, I'm a digital nomad, I'm involved with slow travel, to which I would say, no, you're not. You're a digital nomad. And digital nomadism and slow travel are two very different things. Because the digital nomad is essentially going from expat community, expatriates, people who no longer live in their country, what someone said, it's what wealthier white people call it when other people are immigrants, they're expats. Go from expat community to expat community to expat community. So they're meeting the Australians and the Americans and the English and the French and the Germans and such in different cities wherever they go.
You've seen the photos of people posing on the beach with their laptops in paradise, hashtag YOLO, hashtag one-way ticket, hashtag work from anywhere. But what they didn't show you were any of the struggles that they experienced before or after they snapped that Photoshop pic. I'm Kristen. I've been to more than 60 countries in the last 20 years, and in this video, I'm going to break down for you the top 8 struggles of things that I've experienced personally or that I've witnessed in my globe-trotting friends, and at the end, I'm going to tell you how to overcome them.
Do you get it? There was an interesting woman who did a video not long ago where she talked about what was the problem with my life as a digital nomad. And she was totally into promoting it. But you can tell it burnt her out. And one of the reasons it burnt her out is because it's actually really lonely and alienating.
Hey there, fellow travelers and digital nomads. Mark here with Walter's World. And today I want to talk about are things that nobody talks about when they talk about living the digital nomad lifestyle. Because when you go online, you'll see all those IG pics of their feet dangling off from their van looking at this beautiful lake they're at, or they show them surfing, or, oh, we found another, cute little internet cafe to do our work in. You see those things. And that's the fun part of it. But the thing is, there's a lot of not fun parts of it. And I've done that lifestyle. I have lived that lifestyle before. And I'm going to tell you there's things that people don't bring up. And the biggest one out there is just, you're going to be lonely. It is a lonely life being a digital nomad because you are by yourself going around, right?
And also it means you're living somewhere you always have an escape hatch. So if life gets thick and you're living there for a while, you can just split. Because you can just go back home or whatever. It involves no commitment, or it's just skimming in a different sort of way. It's skimming, pretending to not be skimming, because the fact is you have to do your work, so there you are. And finally, in this problem tourist category, we have extreme travelers and vloggers.
It's been 6 months of driving, and I'm about to arrive. I started in Mexico, made my way up through Texas, Wyoming, Montana, Oregon, and Washington, then all the way north up the Pacific coast of Canada, and even further, crossing the whole of Alaska. I've dedicated the last 6 months of my life to getting here. This speck on a map, this random spot, this true north of mine. This is it! of the Dalton Highway. This is Danforth, this is Prudhoe Bay, this is the northernmost point of my trip. Actually, it's not. The Arctic coastline is still a good 10 miles away, and we can't actually drive there.
Now, some of these people have incredible experiences, and I've been following different ones. Ava Zubek and Peter, who is one of the funniest guys I've ever seen. But sometimes he just does the most. He just recently did a series of the most alienating travels I could possibly imagine, where the whole point was to try to come up with, he went to 4 random places, picked as close to randomly as he could get. One by AI, another by a shaman in a tribe in Peru. You know, it's just like, you know, who was just asked to pick a number, and he had put all these different numbers on a chart, but they had different names.
I'm from Europe. I find the continent incredibly boring. If I had $10,000 to splash out, I would travel to the most random places all around the world.
Except Europe.
The countries and destinations would be picked by chance. Every stop would be a surprise. I would capture everything, taking the viewer on a thrilling odyssey where the roadmap is written by destiny. The thing is, since I'm a very smart boy when it comes to sponsors, I kinda have $10,000.
Let's find out which region of the world I'm coming to. What's it gonna be? Asia, the Americas, Oceania, or Africa? Ooh, right. Is it Asia? Is it Africa? Oceania? Oceania! Oh my god! I've never been in this region of the world. But now, let's proceed to the more interesting part. The selection of the country where I'll travel to. I am excluding countries where I cannot obtain visas on arrival, or the processing time for the online visa is basically close to eternity. This way, I'm missing out on Australia and Nauru. So, where in the fascinating region of Oceania will it be? The rational part of me is asking for New Zealand and Papua New Guinea, which are quite big, but the adventurous, emotional part is asking for the rest of the countries, which most of them I cannot pronounce. This is definitely gonna be a super long trip. At least 3 connection flights. Marshall Islands! Look, it's like in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. This is probably the furthermost place I could have ended up in. Well, I definitely don't want to go to the airport and then back home. I want a real adventure. I want to experience Marshall Islands, which means I have to go to a completely random place there. And this place will be determined by someone who's always right and whose wisdom never disappoints.
And I find that these travelers, it's almost like we've gotten to the point, and this relates, I think, back to the extreme sports people as well, is that we have gotten to the point where the common, the normal, is not good enough for us. There are many reasons for that. One reason is everywhere you go is starting to look alike. Not everywhere, but enough that when you go to this place, you're starting to say, oh, they have them all here like they had in Warsaw. Or you're going to a place going like, oh, they've got 2 McDonald's over here. You know, you start to get these repetition of things that are all over the world.
Hi, it's been a little while. So, 4 months to be exact. Yeah, it's been. So Vilka's gained a few pounds. He now weighs 100 pounds. I've gained a few gray hairs. And I'm in the United States, and I have so much to catch you up on. Everything that's happened in the last 4 months, and all the things that have changed, and everything that's about to happen.
Yes, good boy! You might remember that a year and a half ago, I wanted to drive the Pan American Highway north to south. That was my big dream. Let me introduce you to Expedition Wild. I will spend the next 2 years of my life driving down the longest motorable road in the entire world, the Pan American Highway. So I drove all the way to northern Alaska, where the Pan Am begins.
And now every step that I take is gonna be another step south!
And then I drove all the way down to the southern tip of Baja in Mexico.
Yep, this definitely feels like a slice of paradise.
And there, I paused. After 5 years of full-time travel and filmmaking, I just needed a break. So I took some time off, rekindled my love for running, and worked on some side projects, like my other channel, Unplugged. So I kind of decided to try going barefoot for a while and see how that would feel. From there, my plan was to continue south to South America, but along the way, something changed. I slowly realized that this dream I had been dreaming of was no longer something I wanted to do. You know what I mean?
So these people have opted out to try to find another way to live. Interestingly enough, Eva Zubek, recently, it's like she was trying to do this crazy thing. She landed in Mexico. I don't know why she landed in Mexico, frankly, as opposed to landing in Alaska. And decided she was going to go all the way to Point Barrow in Alaska, or no, Dead Horse Point in Alaska on the highway there, and go and drive all the way down to Chile. Well, she started in Mexico, went through America, had her whole vehicle retooled to be a better place to live in, drove all the way through Canada, and I kept thinking, oh, good, she'll get to go to Alaska and see something. She didn't. I mean, she did, but she didn't. She stayed on the Alaskan highway and then just stayed there, didn't go to any of the cities that I could see, any of the small towns, and just went straight up the highway. And then, because the weather was getting cold, went straight down. I kept writing, go to Haines, Alaska, go to Haines, Alaska. No, didn't happen. And then again, there's another problem. So this person has hundreds of thousands of followers who are all saying things about, you should do this, you should do that. They can't listen to them. It's a very strange way. The one thing they are doing is making good money by doing this. And I can't fault them for that. But we've pushed ourselves. You know what it is although they can have incredible experiences, and Peter, the three names, says it like that, has had some funny, crazy experiences, particularly in South America and Africa. But the truth is, there's this constant desire for quantity and novelty. There's one guy, his name is Drew, I think it's Binsky, and he talks about having been to every country on earth. There is this desire to do as much as possible. And that is a problem, because it means you don't get to know any one thing. And I think that is the point of traveling, is to know something well, know a place well. So now we're going to talk about good travelers. And you'll notice I have just kind of shifted over from talking about tourists to travelers. And I think there is a difference. A tourist is a person who essentially is largely ignorant of where they're going, doesn't do that much research. The best ones will read a Rick Steves guide or any other number of places. Really good ones will do a lot more reading, but then you're out of the tourist category. You're now in the traveler category. But a good traveler is someone who starts to realize, oh, I'm going to someplace different. I had a friend once in New York City who had been invited to go to Japan just for some sort of conference or something. They liked her artwork. And I said, so, have you been reading up on Japan to get ready to go? And she goes, no. I just want it to surprise me. And I'm thinking, really? Japan? This is the place you're going to, just not get ready for because you don't know anything about the culture and you don't know anything about what you might do which could possibly be seen as offensive. You're just going to go there randomly. But that is the way we travel. And this is why I dislike the Instagram style tourism so much, because it's not about the place. It's about me being there and me having this wacky experience, wild experience. So, good travelers. Food and cultural tourists. Now, this is different than the usual tourists who might want to try the local cuisine in places and sample the local culture. But a real good food tourist, and there's a French guy named Alex who does this. He'll travel someplace to learn about how to make pasta, or how to make the best ramen noodles. Really interesting channel it's all about food. But a food or a cultural tourist, and could be someone interested in art or interested in history or something like this, is essentially a person who is wanting to engage more deeply with some aspect of the culture. And this I heartily support. Now, it can involve a kind of snobbishness, but I think in the best cases, it's not about bragging about what you've done. It's about learning and showing a bit of humility in your travels. Then we have what I call friend group travel. Now, good friends traveling together for an extended time is a great idea. There is only one slight hiccup with all of this, and that is the possibility of staying in your own cultural bubble for the whole trip. And this often happens when the people stay together and stay together and stay together, and they're always coming back from their daily trips and talk about how crazy the things they saw were in that culture. So I would say the best way to get around that is to make sure you have times and days when people just go off on their own, because you need that. You need to have that time where you run into the culture without being protected from it. So friend group travel, though, can be wonderful. Even better would be couple travel, but we'll mention that near the end. Okay, here's another one, pilgrimages. And here I am specifically talking about religious travelers. I'm not talking about people who might use a religious destination as just part of their normal secular travels. But I'm talking about the people who, if they go on the Camino de Santiago de Compostela pilgrimage, and I was in one of the cities where that started in France, and it goes all the way over the Pyrenees into into Spain. It's a long trip. Some people do it in segments, and some people treat it like the Appalachian Trail. Oh, okay, fine. It's much better if you treat it as a pilgrimage. That is to say that you're going with people who are looking to be respectful of their religious traditions, to see what the traditions are. But something similar can happen with Mecca, except, of course, if you're not Islamic, if you're not Muslim, you're not going to Mecca, period. It's just not going to happen to you. But I could imagine that would be a once-in-a-lifetime type experience for someone who is Muslim. Family travel. Now, family travel, as I'm talking about here, is more than a family vacation. Family vacations would fit into half a dozen other categories I've already talked about here, and some of the more troubling ones. Cruise ships, all-inclusive resorts, some other kinds of things. But with a family vacation, you have more freedom, more educational experiences. You're not going simply to pass through, but maybe you're going to visit where your family came from. And you're going to spend more time there. Now, in America, we have a problem in that we don't have time, unfortunately. People will say, Americans are always working. Well, one thing we're always doing is giving ourselves very short vacation time. One of the good things about living in Alaska is you could take a month vacation in the winter and everybody would think that was totally normal. I could take a 3-month vacation in the winter, and I did that once, and everyone thought it was normal. But a family travel is a way to bring the family together. Then we have independent travelers, finally. And as I said, it's different than a solo tourist. The independent traveler is someone who's really done their homework. They have spent time with guidebooks. They've also spent time with history books. When I first came to Georgia, and this always surprises Georgians in the best possible way, I read their national epic, The Knight in the Panther's Skin by Shota Bristavelli. Whenever I say that to Georgians, I get cred instantly. The independent traveler is doing things like looking for the real music of the culture, not the pop music, not the electronic dance music, but they're looking for the way this culture has the roots. The independent traveler is going places and asking questions. The independent traveler is going to a place maybe they've never been and really observing it. Or the independent traveler is going back to places they've already been because they've found it to be a wonderful place. One thing the independent traveler might, say, okay, I'll tag along with a group tour to go see the Salzburg Castle. I've done that. But you're not doing it because you have to. You're doing it because, this could be a good thing right now. And you tag along. But it has nothing to do with your motivation for touring and traveling. And finally, the last 5, respectful travelers. So these are all what I would consider top-of-the-line travelers. These are people who understand why they're traveling and are not only getting the best experience they can, but they're also giving something back, both in terms of where they are by learning from people, and but also by becoming a part of what they're experiencing. And one of the ways you can look at all of these is the earlier numbers were all about alienation, fulfilling your own desires. But this is much more about learning something new, education. I hate to use the word self-improvement, but there you are. So the first one would be slow travel, which is, again, another newer category. And I would say this is better than vloggers and extreme travelers. The slow traveler takes their time through. They could be a video blogger. They could be doing more adventurous traveling. For instance, Eva Zubek, whom I criticized earlier, spent quite a bit of time in Pakistan, which I give her all the credit in the world for. Slow travel, now I heard someone interviewed recently on a YouTube channel, and he said he was a slow traveler because he just travels to one place and doesn't think about traveling everywhere in the world. And I would say that's a very good idea. Not quite slow travel, but getting there. I think real slow travel is essentially embedding oneself within the culture for a while. And first, you have to go once to see it new. The one thing a slow traveler can't be is the person just skimming their way through country after country. If you get a Eurail pass and you're just, every 3 days you're getting off at a new stop, you are not a slow traveler. A slow traveler is someone who realizes you don't have to see the whole world. You can't see the whole world. Are you seeing where you're going to? A secondary ancillary question to that is, do you know where you're living? Have you seen where you live? And there is a whole question here of why have people begun to look at the places they come from as being so boring? And this is especially true in little towns in the Midwest, in America, but it's true in so many places. People think there's something really exciting going on in these big cities. Having lived in New York City and having grown up in the San Francisco Bay Area, I can confidently say, having also lived in a very small town in Alaska, that there's not that much going on in big cities. There's a lot of things happening. And when I left New York to go to Alaska, people would often say to me, but Bern, what are you going to do there? But by do, they didn't mean activity, because there was plenty to do in Alaska. You could go hiking. You could go learn about bears. You could start a garden. You could meet with friends and eat salmon together. Plenty to do. What they meant is, what kind of media can you consume there? But now that we have the internet everywhere, that question has become pretty much moot. So, here's another one. Staying with friends, especially friends from that culture, but staying with friends nonetheless in any capacity. One of the things I've always encouraged is when I have friends come visit me in different places, come stay with me and I'll show you around the city. And many of my friends are very appreciative of the little mini tours I would give, taking them around, because they know I'm not there to make any money off of them. I just want them to see the things I've discovered. Maybe they'll like them too. Staying with a friend from that culture gives you an in to that culture. So it means that you are able to find a way to connect with the culture. You get on the fast track. And I don't mean that in the worst way, like you're just skimming through. But I mean, you get injected into the bloodstream of the culture, which is very important. And you start to learn respect for it very quickly, in a way you don't in some of these more alienated modes of travel. Specialty travel is very important. Specialty travel is to understand something specific. History, art, but not just the culture generally. You're not there just to pick up on the vibes of the Netherlands, or, you're not coming to Georgia just to see a few things. You're going there for a very specific purpose, and the specific purpose is something you have defined to yourself very clearly. So, I have traveled around for years researching puppetry in Europe, and that's one of the things that motivated me to come to Georgia. But it wasn't the only thing, but it certainly helped. But one thing I've discovered is when I would go to visit people of puppet shows and to talk with puppeteers, I was immediately inside the culture in a way all those other people just coming because they go, let's go to Prague, wouldn't be. And I remember having this experience where I was watching some people that I knew who were doing an antique version of the Czech Faust play from 150 years ago. And I was in a kind of an abandoned palace, looking straight down on what's called the Royal Road that everyone takes from the Old Town Square over the Charles Bridge and up to the castle. And I was right near the Charles Bridge. And my experience was radically different from these hordes who just seemed to have to follow this trail. I was inside of the Czech Republic. They were just passing through without much knowledge. And they had choices like, should I go to the Vietnamese fish chewing place, massage parlor, and get the fish to chew off the dead flesh from my soul, from my soul, or should I get M&Ms? Because there's someone who sells vast quantities of candies. It's ridiculous stuff. Whereas I was in touch with Czech history in so many different ways by studying puppetry. And then 2 more to go, research travel. Now this is specifically for academics doing a long-term version of the specialty travel. This could also be exchange students going to some country for a year in high school or university. It could be archaeologists. It could be someone going for a very specific but much more long-term reason to visit. And that can be an amazing thing, particularly if you are prepared for it. And finally, you graduate. To me, what is the top is when you're no longer a traveler, you're a visitor. And by visitor, what I mean is you feel at home in this other culture, in this other place. You know it. You have some knowledge of its history, of its culture. You know what would be a violation of the culture. You know what the foibles of those people are. You have friends there. Ideally, it would be knowing the language, which I still haven't mastered here in Georgia. But I have certainly got to the point where when I have friends coming here, I can do all the cultural navigation with my limited language skills. But the point is this. And I'm no longer a visitor here. I live here. So that is beyond graduation. That's like you starting your new job now. To be a visitor somewhere is to be the most respectful person. to understand, to love, to sometimes you're angry at the culture because they act certain kinds of ways, and you don't like everything they do, but you do that in a familiar sense. So we'll leave it there. I think that gives you an idea about, my ranking. You could make your own list of the different kinds of tourists. And I think if I was doing this over, I would have a very specific one for just party tourists. And there's probably some others I thought of along the way. Well, so there you are. Where are you in the list? That's the most important thing. Go through the list and say, who was I? Or how many different types of these? If you get any older, you will find yourself, for instance, maybe when you're younger, you get taken on a cruise ship. Later, you go back as an independent tourist or traveler. Eventually, you develop some hobby or interest that takes you to a place to really learn something of a skill that's related to this place. You find out where they make the best shoes in the world. Hint, it's probably Italy. You go to a place where to research some sort of art. Maybe you have a certain kind of cooking you want to learn. In other words, you graduate to near the top of the list. It's easy to do, but it requires imagination. It requires your will. It requires saying to yourself, no, I'm not going to be a wasteful bottom feeder tourist who just lets people do something for me. No, tourism isn't just going to be me relaxing at an all-inclusive resort. I'm going to get out and actually appreciate things and not disturb the world unduly as I go. No matter how, as I used to say to my tourists in Alaska when I take them to see bears, we may see really stupid people, but we're not going to be stupid. And that's my recommendation for you as far as tourism goes. And in fact, one day we saw some remarkably stupid people, but we'll save that story for the Tourism and Reality series when I talk about Alaska. But don't be that. Learn, graduate, get better, learn more when you travel. Take time. All right, so I'm living in Tbilisi, Georgia. I'll bet most of you have never been there. Very few of you can find it on a map. Go look now. Here's a hint. There's the map. Find Tbilisi, Georgia. And don't come visit here as a tourist. Come as a visitor. From Tbilisi, this is Bern saying, as the Georgians say, temporarily, droabit. We'll meet again soon.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.